My name is Haley Carver, and I'm 35 years old. I built my life like I built my business, line by line, clause by clause. No miracles, no lucky breaks. Just late nights, cold coffee, and a stubborn refusal to let anything I hadn't earned tell me who I was. 10 years ago, I was renting a room in a shared apartment with a door that didn't quite lock and a laptop that overheated every time I opened more than 3 tabs. Now, I run a software consulting firm that quietly clears more in a quarter than some people see in 5 years. I have employees, retainers, clients who wait for my calendar to open up. I also have a history of watching women I love walk away from marriages with half a life and a fraction of what they helped build. My mother, my aunt, my college roommate. Different stories, same ending. So when people ask me if a prenup is unromantic, I tend to think of my mother crying into a stack of unpaid bills at the kitchen table and decide I can live with being unromantic. 6 years ago, when my boyfriend Mark got down on one knee in a crowded restaurant and pulled out a ring that sparkled under the dim lights, the world blurred. In the way it does in movies, waiters clapped. Someone at the next table whistled. I laughed and cried and said yes into his shoulder, feeling like the universe had finally decided I'd earned a soft place to land. The next day I called my lawyer. The business was already worth over $2 million at that point and growing fast. It wasn't about not loving Mark. It was about not sacrificing the decade of my life I'd poured into this company in case things went sideways. Love and legal protection were not mutually exclusive. Mark hadn't seen it that way at first. A prenup? He'd said, staring at the document like it was something that had crawled out from under the fridge. Haley, seriously? You don't trust me? It's not about trust, I'd said, trying to keep my voice calm. It's about being realistic. I built the company before we even met. If we got divorced for any reason at all, cheating, growing apart, whatever, I don't think it's fair for you to walk away with half of something you didn't build. So you think I'd just take your money? His jaw had tightened. Is that what you think of me? I remember the sick twist in my stomach, the way my fingers dug into the edge of the kitchen counter. I think people change, I said softly. I think love can be real and still not be permanent. If we stay together forever, this document never matters. If we don't, we both know what happens. No surprises, no wars. He'd sulked for days. There were speeches about partnership and unity, about how marriage meant mine and yours became ours. I listened. I empathized, but I didn't move. In the end, he signed. His lawyer reviewed everything. We adjusted a few things, clarified some language, made sure the division of assets earned during the marriage would be fair. But there was one clause my lawyer had suggested that I refused to bend on. The infidelity clause. If either of us cheated, the cheater forfeited their share of marital assets and owed the other $500,000. Loud, clear, unambiguous. Cheating would be financially catastrophic. Isn't that a little extreme? Mark had asked, eyebrows raised as he flipped through the pages. So is having your heart ripped out, I'd said. If either of us ever decides we want someone else, we walk away first. We don't get to eat cake in 2 kitchens. He'd rolled his eyes, but he initialed that paragraph like he did the others. Fine. It's not like I'm ever going to cheat on you, he'd said, almost offended by the idea. So who cares? I did. I cared enough to put it in ink. That was 6 years ago. Last week, I flew out for a client meeting 3 states away. Mark kissed me at the door, told me to send photos, texted me memes between my layover and my hotel. He told me he missed me, that the bed felt too big without me. I believed him. The trip was supposed to last 4 days. On the 3rd afternoon, I got a text from the airline. My return flight had been canceled due to a staffing issue, but they could move me to an earlier one. I took it. I was tired, I missed my own bed, and I wanted a night where I didn't have to pretend to be on for anyone. By the time the plane touched down, it was a little after 11. My phone buzzed with a message from Mark. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I'll pick you up at the airport. I stared at the text, thumb hovering over the keyboard. For a second, I considered calling him to say surprise, I'm already here. Then I pictured him grinning in the arrivals lounge in the morning, maybe holding a coffee, and decided to let the surprise run the other way. It felt sweet, intimate. The kind of small, good moment I didn't take for granted. Traffic was light. The city looked softer at that hour, like someone had turned the contrast down. I pulled into our driveway around midnight. There was a car parked along the curb that I didn't recognize. low, compact, definitely not Mark's. A sticker on the back window from a gym I'd never heard of. A tiny chill slid down my spine, then I shook it off. People parked on our street all the time. We weren't the only people who lived in this neighborhood. The house was dark when I stepped inside, but not the kind of dark that said empty. The kind of dark where lights had been turned off on purpose. I locked the door behind me, my suitcase wheels whispering against the hardwood as I pulled it through the entryway. Upstairs, a faint glow bled through the crack under the bedroom door. For a heartbeat, my brain offered a benign explanation. Mark fell asleep with the TV on, or he'd stayed up late gaming, or maybe he'd been reading and forgot to turn off the lamp. Then I heard it. Not the TV, not a podcast, not any sound I'd ever associate with being alone. A muffled laugh, a low murmur, the creak of the mattress we'd picked out together after reading too many online reviews. I stopped halfway up the stairs. Something inside me went very still, like a pool of water icing over. This is not happening, my mind said automatically, politely, like it was offering me a menu of alternative realities. This is a misunderstanding. You're tired. Jet lag. Maybe it's... Another sound, a sharper gasp, breathy and intimate, shoved the door closed on every denial. I pulled my phone from my pocket with hands that felt oddly steady. The screen lit my face with cold blue light. My thumb moved almost on its own. Voice recorder, tap. The audio counter began to climb. I walked the rest of the way up the stairs. Each step sounded too loud, too slow, like I was walking through someone else's house, someone else's life. I paused outside the bedroom door, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it had migrated up into my throat. For one ridiculous moment, I thought about turning around, about walking back down the stairs, back out to the car, driving somewhere, anywhere, and letting this whole thing collapse without me watching. Instead, I knocked. Chaos. Scrambling. The scrape of the bed frame against the floor. A woman's voice, high and startled. Mark cursing under his breath. The doorknob turned, then the door cracked open. Mark stood there in nothing but sweats, chest heaving, hair a mess, like someone had just been running their fingers through it. His eyes went wide, draining of color in real time. "Haley," he choked out, you're home early." "I am," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded distant, almost conversational. "Who's in our bed, Mark?" Behind him, a young woman appeared, wrapping my robe around herself like a shield. She couldn't have been more than mid-20s. Long hair, smudged lipstick, eyes like a deer on a highway. I should go," she stammered, skirting around him, keeping her gaze on the floor. She squeezed past me, the scent of unfamiliar perfume trailing after her as she practically ran down the hallway. Mark reached for my arm. "Haley, wait. I can explain." "It looks pretty self-explanatory from where I'm standing," I said. My hand was still at my side, phone recording every word. "You brought someone into our bed." "It was a mistake," he blurted. "We had too much to drink, and one thing led to another. It's not like I've been having some long-term affair. It was one night. One stupid night." One night. The words hung between us like a hook. "You can forgive one night, right?" he pushed, desperation sharpening his voice. "We've been together 6 years, Haley. Are you really going to throw everything away over one mistake?" I looked at him. I thought about my mother at the kitchen table and my aunt sleeping on a friend's couch after her divorce. I thought about all the nights I'd fallen asleep with my laptop open, chasing down contracts so this house, this life, could exist at all. "Actually," I said quietly, "your timing is perfect." His forehead creased. "What?" I walked past him without touching him. The room still smelled like sex and our lavender linen spray. I didn't let myself look at the bed. Down the hall, into my office. The safe sat in the corner, unassuming, tucked behind a plant. My fingers moved automatically over the keypad. The door clicked open. The prenup was right where I'd left it, neatly filed in a folder. When I walked back into the bedroom, Mark was sitting on the edge of the mattress, elbows on his knees, hands pressed over his face. He looked up when he heard the rustle of paper. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice cracking. I opened the document to the familiar page and held it up between us, tapping the paragraph I could almost recite from memory. "Do you remember this?" I asked. He squinted, then his face went slack. "Haley. Section 7, paragraph 3, I said. Infidelity clause. If either party cheats, they forfeit their share of marital assets and owe the other person $500,000. "That's not fair," he snapped, panic edging into anger. "It was one time, one night. You can't seriously be—" "How many times with her?" I asked. "Or is she just tonight's version?" His mouth opened, then shut. He looked away. I nodded, the answer settling like a stone in my chest. Pack a bag, I said. You're not sleeping here tonight. My lawyer will contact yours in the morning. You can't kick me out. This is my house, too. Check the deed, I said softly. I bought this place before we ever met, and you violated the only condition that could ever touch what we built together. He spent the next hour cycling between begging and shouting. He loved me. It didn't mean anything. I was being cold. The clause was insane. No court would enforce it. I stood there and listened to all of it with that same unnatural calm, like the real me was locked in another room, screaming into a pillow. Eventually, he left. The front door slammed. His car engine roared, then faded down the street. Silence seeped into the house. I went to my office, turned on the desk lamp, and opened my laptop. The glow of the screen felt harsh in the dark room. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second before I opened our joint banking app. If it was really one night, the numbers would tell me. They didn't. Under the ordinary blur of groceries and utilities and streaming subscriptions, there were charges that didn't belong, hotel rooms I didn't remember, bars and restaurants in neighborhoods we never went to together, rideshare receipts at odd hours. I stared at the screen as the list grew, a slow, poisonous pattern emerging line by line. It hadn't been one night. The boat had been taking on water for a long time. Tonight was just the moment I finally heard the crack in the hull. When morning came, it didn't feel like morning. It felt like the same night had stretched itself thin and gray across the sky, refusing to end. I hadn't slept. I wasn't sure I could have, even if I'd tried. My body felt wired, sharp-edged, like every nerve was waiting for the next blow. At 8:02 a.m., I called my lawyer, Daniel Brooks. He'd been with me since the early days of my company, sharp, methodical, and allergic to drama. When he picked up, his voice was groggy but steady. "Haley, everything all right?" "No," I said plainly. "Mark cheated. I have audio, and the prenup was violated." A beat of silence on his end, just long enough to acknowledge the gravity, not long enough to be unprofessional. "I'll clear my afternoon," he said. "Bring everything." His office sat on the 32nd floor of a downtown building. Glass walls, sleek furniture, the kind of muted elegance that suggested competence without ever needing to prove it. Daniel met me at the door himself. He didn't hug me. He wasn't a hugging type. He just gestured me inside with the same calm he used when reviewing a contract worth millions. I handed him the prenup, the recorded audio, and a printed list of the suspicious charges I'd spent half the night compiling. He read in silence, occasionally pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. When he finally closed the folder, he tapped his finger against the table thoughtfully. "This is airtight, Haley." "You're sure?" "I drafted it," he said dryly. He corrected himself with a nod. Mark had independent counsel. Both sides negotiated terms, and the clause is very clear. One act of infidelity triggers forfeiture and the $500,000 penalty. I exhaled, slow and shaky. "This isn't going to be fun," Daniel continued, "but you're on solid ground." Fun. I almost laughed. My relationship had just imploded, and we were talking like we were preparing to sue over a late payment. But that was how Daniel operated. That was how I needed to operate, too. "What happens now?" I asked. "We notify his lawyer. He'll likely claim coercion or misunderstanding. They'll try to fight the clause as excessive, but there's nothing unreasonable about protecting assets in a high-net-worth situation." He looked at me, eyes steady, voice gentle. "You did the right thing." I didn't feel like I had done the right thing. I felt hollow. The first call came before I even left the office. An unknown number. I let it ring. Then my screen lit again, this time with Mark's name. I answered. "Haley, please," he said immediately, voice hoarse, like he hadn't slept either. "Don't do this. Can we just talk?" "We will," I said, "through lawyers." "Haley, come on. You're punishing me for one night." "One night?" My voice cracked like a whip. "Do you want to try that again?" Silence. Then he hung up. The next call came 20 minutes later from his sister Katie. The moment I said hello, she launched into a tirade. "How could you do this to him? He told us everything. You're destroying his life over a mistake. You've always been controlling, Haley. We've all seen it." I didn't interrupt her. I didn't defend myself. I didn't even breathe deeply. When she finally paused, waiting for me to respond, I simply said, "He cheated. That was his choice, not mine." And then I ended the call. 5 minutes later, his mother called. She didn't scream. She sobbed. She begged. She pleaded. She told me Mark was in shock, not himself, punishing himself enough. I listened until she switched from tears to threats. "I will tell everyone what you're doing to him. she said through clenched teeth. Everyone will know what kind of woman you really are. Then tell them, I said, but tell the truth while you're at it. I hung up again. Within 2 hours, the Facebook fallout began. I didn't use social media much, but my phone buzzed with notifications as people tagged me in vague, passive-aggressive posts on Mark's friends' feeds. Some people use money to control others. Financial abuse is real. Some partners think love is a contract instead of a commitment. No names, but everyone knew. A few mutual friends messaged me privately. What's going on? Is this about Mark? I heard you're trying to take everything he has. Did he really cheat? I kept my answers short. Yes, he cheated. Yes, the prenup had clear terms. No, I'm not taking everything. I'm enforcing what he signed. Some people accepted that. Some didn't. I'd gone from power couple inspiration to ice queen villain in under 12 hours. By the next morning, Daniel called. We have a response from his lawyer, he said. You're not going to like it. I assumed I wouldn't, I muttered. He sighed. They're claiming the prenup was signed under duress. That Mark didn't understand what he was agreeing to. That the infidelity penalty is punitive and unenforceable. A slow burn ignited behind my ribs. Unenforceable, I repeated. He had his own attorney. I know, Daniel said, and we documented every revision he requested, but they're going to try anyway. Of course they were. Of course he wouldn't face the consequences head on. What now? I asked. We schedule a meeting. Negotiations come first, then court if necessary. The negotiation meeting happened 2 days later. Daniel and I took one side of a polished oak conference table. Mark and his lawyer sat across from us. Mark looked terrible. Eyes red, jaw tight, fingers tapping relentlessly against his knee under the table. But I didn't let myself soften. I couldn't. His lawyer cleared his throat. Let's begin. My client feels the prenup was signed under emotional pressure. Daniel cut him off before he could build momentum. Your client had independent counsel, he said calmly. Your client negotiated specific terms. Your client willingly initialed each clause. Mark's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Yes, but the penalty is extreme. So is sleeping with someone else, Daniel replied without raising his voice. The room went silent. Mark swallowed hard, then spoke in a low, trembling tone. Haley, please, you're being so cold. I made a mistake. One mistake. You really want to ruin me over it? I didn't react. Because if I reacted, I would break. Mark, I said quietly, you ruined yourself. I'm not punishing you. I'm enforcing what you agreed to. He shook his head, anger replacing desperation. This is vindictive. This isn't who you are. The man I thought I knew, I said, wouldn't have done this to me. He looked away. His lawyer jumped back in, scrambling. We're asking for leniency, a clean break, no financial penalty. No, I said. Haley, you signed, I said. You violated it. You owe the consequences. Negotiation ended right there. His lawyer looked defeated as he packed his papers. Mark looked shattered. I didn't look at either of them as I walked out. 2 days later, Daniel forwarded me a new filing. Mark's lawyer had submitted a motion to invalidate the prenup entirely. My stomach dropped as I scrolled through it. Coercion, lack of understanding, unconscionable penalty, emotional manipulation, power imbalance. They threw everything they had at the wall. Daniel's reply was already drafted. Evidence of independent counsel. Email exchanges proving Mark negotiated revisions. Certification from his lawyer confirming full explanation of terms. Documentation showing he lived under the prenup without complaint for 6 years. Case law supporting penalty clauses. Income records showing he was not financially vulnerable. At the end, Daniel had added one clinical brutal sentence. The petitioner's infidelity triggered a clause he knowingly and voluntarily accepted. I stared at it for a long time, tears pricking unexpectedly at the corners of my eyes. Not because of the legal war, not because of the social fallout, but because the man I had loved for 6 years was now trying to rewrite history to paint himself as the victim of the contract he'd once shrugged off. He wasn't trying to win fairly. He was trying to rewrite the truth. That broke something in me far deeper than the cheating itself. The hearing was set for the following week. 7 days. 7 days until I would sit across from him in a courtroom and watch the judge decide whether the truth still mattered. But the truth was already shifting under my feet because those suspicious charges spread across our bank statements wouldn't leave me alone. Every night I found myself staring at them, line after line, each hotel charge or bar tab beating like a pulse. It wasn't one night, and my gut told me it wasn't even close. I needed proof. So I hired a forensic accountant. If Mark had spent our shared money on someone else, I wanted the full picture. I wasn't ready for how big that picture would turn out to be. The courthouse was colder than I expected, not temperature-wise, emotionally. Sterile hallways, polished floors, echoes that made every footstep sound like a verdict. I walked in wearing a tailored navy suit and a composure I'd stapled together layer by layer over the past 7 days. Daniel walked beside me, expression neutral, carrying a slim briefcase that held enough documentation to drown an argument twice the size of Mark's motion. He offered no pep talk. That wasn't his style. His presence was the pep talk. Mark arrived moments later with his attorney. He looked thinner, haggard, like the weight of the week had drained him more than mine had drained me. His lawyer leaned toward him, whispering last-minute instructions. Mark didn't look at me until the bailiff called us in. When his eyes finally lifted to meet mine, something flickered. Shame, fear, entitlement, all swirling in quick succession. But no remorse, not really. Not the kind that mattered. We took our seats. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with a reputation for being ruthlessly efficient, entered the courtroom and settled behind the bench. She scanned her docket, then looked up at us with the kind of stare that made even the wood paneling straighten its posture. "Case number 4728B, she said. "Motion to invalidate prenuptial agreement. Let's proceed." Mark's lawyer rose first. "Your Honor," he began, already performing, "my client signed the prenup in a moment of emotional pressure. He did not fully understand the terms. The infidelity penalty of $500,000 is excessively punitive." The judge raised a hand. "Counselor, I'll ask directly. Did your client have independent legal counsel at the time of signing?" Mark's lawyer faltered. "Yes, but... Did that counsel review the agreement with him?" "Yes, but we argue he didn't truly comprehend the financial ramifications." The judge narrowed her gaze. "Is your client a college-educated adult with full mental capacity?" A long pause. "Yes." She nodded once. "Continue." He swallowed. "Your Honor, the clause is unconscionably harsh for a single incident. We believe..." "The clause," the judge said, flipping to a page in the prenup Daniel had provided, "states clearly that any incident of infidelity triggers the penalty. There is no threshold for number of occurrences. One is sufficient." Her tone was cool, impartial, final. Mark's lawyer tried again, voice tightening. "Your Honor, the financial burden will affect him for decades. That," the judge said, closing the document with a soft thud, "is a concern your client should have weighed before engaging in actions that would trigger this exact clause." Mark's shoulders slumped. The judge turned her attention to Daniel. "Response?" Daniel rose with calm precision. "Your Honor, both parties had independent counsel. Both initialed each clause, including the infidelity clause. No objections were raised at the time of signing or at any point during the 6 years of marriage. There is no evidence of coercion. The terms are valid and enforceable." He sat. The judge nodded slowly, decisively. "Motion to invalidate is denied." Just like that. Mark's lawyer sagged. Mark closed his eyes. I felt nothing. No triumph, no relief. Just the steady forward motion of inevitability. The judge continued. "We will proceed with dissolution and enforcement of the prenup. Given the clarity of the contract and evidence provided, I am inclined towards summary judgment. Prepare filings accordingly." She tapped her gavel once. "Next case." Outside the courtroom, Mark tried to approach me. He moved quickly, almost stumbling, and his lawyer reached out as if to stop him, but Mark had already closed the distance. "Haley, please," he said, voice cracking. "Just talk to me. Not as opposing sides, just us." I didn't step back. I didn't step forward either. "There is no us anymore, Mark." His face twisted. "I made a mistake." "You made many," I said quietly. He flinched. For a moment, it looked like he might cry. Then anger spread across his features. "You're actually going to do this to me? Over one night?" "It wasn't one night," I replied, "and we both know it." He froze. Something ugly flashed behind his eyes. When I turned away, he whispered something I wasn't meant to hear. "You're heartless." I kept walking. His lawyer called Daniel later that afternoon, sounding exhausted. "Haley's refusing to negotiate," he said. "My client can't pay $500,000. He's proposing a reduction. A significant reduction." "No," Daniel said simply. "Even 50,000? The lawyer pushed. "No. Can she consider any flexibility at all?" Daniel's voice was calm steel. "She doesn't need to consider anything." The judge was clear. A long, defeated sigh. "Then there's nothing more to discuss." That evening, the forensic accountant emailed me. Subject, findings attached. Urgent review, recommended. I clicked the document open with hands that trembled, just a little. Pages. Pages of itemized expenses. Hotel stays stretching back almost 2 years. Charges from boutique restaurants Mark had never taken me to. Gift receipts. Payments labeled as services that the accountant had flagged as suspicious. Rideshare trips at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3:17 a.m., all tied to our joint credit card. All paid with marital funds. All fitting together into a picture so clear it made my skin crawl. Mark hadn't cheated one night. He'd cheated dozens of nights, with multiple women, and he'd used our shared money to do it. I stared at the report until my vision blurred, the words swimming. The worst part, the absolute ugliest part, was how unsurprised I was. Something inside me had known. Something in me had started grieving long before I even knew what I was grieving for. I forwarded the report to Daniel. He called within minutes. "This changes everything," he said. "Now we're no longer talking about just the infidelity penalty. This is dissipation of assets. Money he used on affairs must be reimbursed separately." "How much?" I whispered. "Approximately $15,000. The room tilted a little. "So he owes $515,000, Daniel confirmed, potentially more with fees. Silence stretched between us, heavy and electric. "Haley," he said gently, "we move forward immediately." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Mark thought the worst was the $500,000 penalty. He had no idea what was coming next. The morning of the final hearing dawned painfully bright, like the sun had decided to shine harder just to mock how hollow I felt inside. I sat in my parked car outside the courthouse, hands wrapped around the steering wheel, watching people come and go with the easy rhythm of those whose lives weren't disintegrating on a sanitized courtroom floor. Daniel arrived precisely on time, his suit immaculate, his demeanor unchanging, calm, focused, quietly lethal. He opened my passenger door. "You ready?" he asked. "No," I answered truthfully, "but I'm here." He nodded, which was Daniel speak for "that's enough." We walked inside. Mark looked ruined. I don't say that with satisfaction. It wasn't gratifying. It wasn't vindicating. It was simply true. He had dark circles under his eyes. His posture collapsed inward, as if shame weighed more than gravity. His lawyer, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the past 2 weeks, clutched a thick binder and avoided making eye contact with anyone. When we entered the courtroom, Mark dared a glance at me. His expression wasn't angry today. It was defeated. But defeat doesn't erase what was done. Consequences don't evaporate because someone finally regrets earning them. The judge entered, settled her robe, and shuffled the papers before her. "Let's proceed," she said. "This is the final hearing to dissolve the marriage and enforce the prenuptial agreement." Her voice echoed like a closing door. Mark's lawyer rose. "Your Honor, before we begin, I'd like to—" "No," the judge said without looking up. "We are not reopening arguments already denied." He froze mid-sentence. The judge continued, "I have reviewed all filings, including the amendment regarding dissipation of marital assets." Daniel stood. "Your Honor, as documented by the forensic accountant." "I've read the report," the judge said, waving a hand. "Your client's husband spent approximately $14,800 of marital funds on extramarital activities with multiple women. That amount will be added to the penalty owed." Mark closed his eyes. I watched his throat work as he swallowed hard, shame and panic creating a trembling tension along his jawline. The judge turned toward him. "Sir, do you contest these findings?" His lawyer nudged him. Mark's voice came out small. "No, Your Honor." The judge nodded. "Very well." She looked down at her notes, then back up at us, with the cool efficiency of someone delivering a medical diagnosis rather than altering the trajectory of a person's entire life. "Final terms," she said. "All marital assets are awarded to the petitioner, Ms. Carver. The respondent retains personal property only. Per the infidelity clause, the respondent owes $500,000 to the petitioner. Additionally, $14,800 for dissipation of assets. Total, $514,800. Mark's lawyer tried to salvage something. "Your Honor, my client is asking the court for leniency." "No," the judge said simply. "But the financial burden will—" "No," she repeated, firmer this time. "Your client signed a contract with clear consequences. He violated those terms repeatedly. The court enforces agreements made by competent adults." Mark's lawyer deflated, his shoulders sagging. The judge continued, "Payment will be arranged in the form of a monthly plan, $2,500 a month, with wage garnishment provisions if payments are missed. This obligation is enforceable until paid in full and is not dischargeable via bankruptcy." Mark's face crumpled. He whispered something that sounded like God, but his voice broke halfway through. The judge signed the order. Marriage dissolved. Court is adjourned. Her gavel hit the block with a finality that reverberated through the room. It was over. Legally, anyway. Emotionally, I wasn't sure anything was over yet, but it was ending. And endings, even brutal ones, come with a strange, quiet relief. We stepped into the hallway. Mark's lawyer approached Daniel with an air of desperation. There must be a compromise, he said. A lump sum? Reduced payment? Anything? He'll sign whatever non-disclosure clause she wants. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at me. The decision was mine. I thought of the hotel charges, the whispered phone calls, the passive-aggressive Facebook posts, his mother's threats, his sister's screaming tirade, his denial, his lies, his plea for mercy only after consequences landed. I thought of the younger women in hotel lobbies while I was running a multi-million-dollar business, of the bank statements, of the nights he'd come home late and shrug. Long day. And finally, I thought of the way he'd looked at me on the stairs the night I caught him. The shock, yes, but also the annoyance of someone whose fun had been interrupted. No, I said softly. Judgment stands. Mark's lawyer nodded tightly. He knew it was over. He turned to leave. Mark, however, took a step toward me. Haley, he whispered, as if my name were a last lifeline. Please, please don't do this. I can't survive this. I held his gaze, calm, level, unmoved. You should have thought about that before you made me come home to another woman in our bed. His face shattered. He didn't follow when I walked away. I didn't hear from Mark directly for a week. Then one night, around midnight, an unknown number texted me. Hope you're happy. You destroyed my life over a mistake. Everyone will know what you really are. I stared at it for 3 seconds, then forwarded the message to Daniel. He responded a moment later. Documented. No reply necessary. I blocked the number. No anger, no sadness, just closure. Word spread slowly among our friends. Some expressed sympathy, some distanced themselves, some sent quiet messages saying, I'm proud of you for not letting him walk all over you. I didn't respond to most of them. I was tired. Tired of defending reality. Tired of being called cold for refusing to set myself on fire to keep someone else warm. Tired of the emotional labor of untangling someone else's choices from my worth. But underneath the exhaustion, something else had settled. A kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years. Not peace, but the beginning of it. A foundation being cleared. A hull being rebuilt. A life pausing, finally, so it could start again. When the official divorce documents arrived in the mail, crisp and final, I signed them at my kitchen table. Sunlight spilled over the pages. The house was silent. Too silent. But this time, the silence didn't feel like something collapsing. It felt like something opening. The day after the divorce finalized, I woke before sunrise. Not because I had to, not because of an alarm, but because my body, for the first time in months, didn't feel weighed down by dread. The house was still, the kind of stillness that feels like a held breath, waiting to be released. I made coffee and stood by the window, watching the sky turn from charcoal to lavender to soft gold. I wasn't happy, I wasn't triumphant, but I was standing, and that was enough. I sold the house 2 weeks later. People asked if it wasn't too soon, if I shouldn't take time to process before making decisions. They didn't understand that the house had become a museum of ghosts, shadows of conversations, the imprint of betrayal hanging in the air like leftover smoke. I didn't want rooms where other women's laughter still echoed between the walls. I didn't want a bed that had held lies. I didn't want to keep a place where I'd built a life with someone who, in hindsight, never intended to protect it. So I listed it. It sold fast. The market was high. With the proceeds, I bought a condo downtown, sleek, modern, floor-to-ceiling windows, clean lines, no history embedded in the corners. It felt like a reset button disguised as real estate. Moving day was quiet. I carried boxes labeled office and kitchen and bedroom, and when I set them down in the new space, I felt something uncoil in my chest, a release, a reclamation. This home would be mine in every sense of the word. No shared bank account, no dual signatures, no compromises made for someone who'd forgotten what regard looked like. Just mine. Every month, right on schedule, the first automatic payment hit my account, $2,500 from Mark's wages. I set it to filter into a separate investment account, untouched, accumulating quietly like a whispered apology from the universe. I didn't check the balance obsessively. I didn't savor it. I didn't weaponize it. It was simply there, a reminder that consequences have gravity, even when people pretend they don't. Daniel called it poetic justice. I called it bookkeeping. Some friends asked me what I planned to do with the money when it was all paid off. 17 years from now, give or take. I didn't have a real answer. Maybe I'll donate it, I said once. Maybe I'll buy something beautiful. Or maybe I'll let it sit and earn interest longer than Mark was ever in my life. Someone laughed. I didn't. It wasn't a joke. It was simply the truth. People kept asking if I felt guilty. Did I feel like the punishment outweighed the crime? Did I feel responsible for his financial ruin? Did I ever consider forgiving him and starting over? The answer to all three was the same, delivered in the same steady tone every time. No. Guilt is for mistakes I've made, not consequences others earn. And forgiveness is not the same thing as self-erasure. The cheating was bad, ugly, humiliating. But the lying, the ongoing deceit, the multiple affairs, the way he tried to rewrite reality in court, that was what killed everything. Love cannot survive where truth has been assassinated. Trust cannot be rebuilt on termite-eaten beams. A relationship cannot be resurrected when one person keeps digging its grave with every denial, every manipulation, it was only one time when the receipts told a very different story. He didn't just betray me. He erased the version of himself I once loved. There was nothing left to return to. Some nights I thought about the girl I caught in my bedroom, the shock on her face, the way she pulled my robe around her like a shield, the way she ran, barefoot, out of the house. I didn't hate her. I didn't pity her either. She wasn't the cause. She was just one of the symptoms. The disease had started long before I ever opened that bedroom door. The more distance I put between myself and the past, the more I realized how much I had been carrying alone. Quiet worries, little imbalances, the creak of a hull weakening long before I heard the crack. I remembered the times he'd dismissed my long work hours while benefiting from the life they enabled, the subtle resentments, the comments about your money and my freedom, the lack of real partnership camouflaged by charm. I remembered the day we signed the prenup, how annoyed he'd seemed, how small a thing it had felt like at the time. I didn't know then that the document would become the very thing that saved me from losing everything I'd built. People say prenups are unromantic, but romance doesn't pay the attorney fees of a cheating spouse. Romance doesn't protect the life you spent a decade constructing. Romance doesn't keep your heart from shattering. But clarity keeps the pieces from being swept out the door with half your net worth. Would I get a prenup again someday? Absolutely. Not because I expect betrayal. Because I respect myself enough to protect the work I've done. Love should be a choice, not a loophole. I didn't date for a long time. I didn't crave companionship. I didn't want validation. I didn't need reassurance. I needed quiet. I needed space where someone else's mistakes didn't echo. I needed a life that felt like mine again. Therapy helped. Work helped. Friends helped in small, careful ways. My new condo helped the most. Every night, I walked into a place with no ghosts. Every morning, I drank coffee in sunlight that felt clean. I began to feel myself again. Not the woman who'd been betrayed. Not the one who'd taken her ex-husband apart in court. Not the one whose phone buzzed with reminders of payments owed. Just me, Haley Carver, 35, business owner, self-sufficient, standing on her own 2 feet. No longer carrying a sinking ship on her shoulders. The last line of the prenup sat in my mind from time to time. This agreement exists to protect what has been built prior to the union, and to affirm that trust, fidelity, and integrity are the foundation of any future together. Trust, fidelity, integrity. Not glamorous words, not cinematic, not dramatic, but ballast never is. No one praises ballast until the boat lists. And mine had listed, cracked, splintered. But I rebuilt. Stronger, wiser, untethered from anything that tried to drag me under. The story didn't end in fireworks or revenge or some dramatic vindication. It ended with a quiet woman in a sunlit condo, sipping coffee, paying her own bills, thriving in ways that didn't require an audience. Not triumphant, not broken, just free.